This is often how we make cases in which we have no evidence from a crime scene. We simply tell the jury, I'm going to trace the fuse before this man killed his wife, and then afterwards, all of his activity and the fallout, and that's going to demonstrate what he did on the day of the murder. You're doing the same thing here with Jesus. There's a fuse that leads up to Jesus. Then there's fallout in history after Jesus. And from just the fuse and the fallout, you can reconstruct the story of Jesus, even if you have no New Testament. That's the concept in the book. Mm-hmm. Part of that fuse is a spiritual fuse. All of the mythologies worshipped by ancient people groups. It turns out that these ancient mythologies, if you study them, Osiris and Attis and Heracles and even Quetzalcoatl in South America, if you study all of these, even if they're separated by in parts of the world in which they've got no contact with each other, what you'll discover is that the ancient myths have some impressive similarities. You'll see that there's about 15 similarities that I identify that ancient myths share with one another. Now, none has more than about 10 of these similarities, and none has less than about 6. And it's a different 10 or 6 to 10, depending on the mythology. But about 15 common, and they are all the rather benign, common explanations or expectations that ancients would have. Ancient people, when they think about God, they think, well, he's probably going to be able to work miracles. Well, that's pretty common. He probably came into the world supernaturally. Well, that's pretty common. He probably can beat death. Well, that's pretty common amongst ancient myths. But not everyone believes that their myth can do this. Now, when we get to Jesus in history, Jesus is the one person who possesses all 15 attributes that the ancients expect in God. Even though he's very different in terms of, some of them come into the world supernaturally by emerging out of the side of a mountain. One is born out of the hip or the thigh of another god. Jesus is born of a virgin. These are different kinds of appearances, but like you would expect, God enters the world in an unnatural way. But Jesus possesses all of he embodies the expectations that people have for God, even the ancient expectations of those who wrote myths. And this is exactly what Paul is talking about on Mars Hill in Acts 17. It's not a mystery. He says, yep, you folks believe a lot about God. You're very religious, but I'm here to show you what your poets have dreamed about. And he even cites ancient poetry from the pagan mythologies, from the pagan culture. And he said, but I'm here to show you what we saw. You might have thought about these things, but we actually saw the risen Christ. Now that's the difference, is that the stories from the myths never claim to be eyewitness accounts. The stories of the Gospels do. And that is what separates Jesus from these mythologies. But don't be surprised. When the expected meets the expectations of the expecter, you get a good result. And sure enough, Jesus does meet the expectations of the ancients. And it's one of the reasons why this Jesus story ignites so quickly and spreads like wildfire, because it turns out he meets the some people would say, oh, well, because he's similar to the other ancient myths, he must also be a myth. No, actually, he's similar because all of us have been designed in the image of God, even the ancient non-Christians, ancient non-Jews, the ancient Gentiles. They also were created in the image of God. So don't be surprised when they think about God, they get some things right. They get a lot wrong, and that's what Paul was trying to correct on Mars Hill.